Well, so hi everyone, I'm Robert and this is Maciek. We are from DeepSense.io and we would like to talk about face recognition for whales. I know the topic might sound a little bit like a joke. Actually, when I first heard about it, it sounded like April Fool's Day, but the problem and the issue is real. So to explain this, imagine that you are a scientist or a researcher that cares deeply about North Atlantic right whales, which, by the way, are endangered species with less than 500 individuals left. Then it's natural that you would like to track the population and monitor it. Sometimes you would need to target individual whales for health assessments, or acoustic recordings, or maybe biological samples. So how would you go about doing this? It's very simple. You just take a plane, fly over the ocean, look at the window, then maybe from time to time you will spot a whale, look at it for a second or two, and then you know it. It's the whale number 213 called Zdzisław. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. The reality is different, even for experienced researchers and scientists that spend most of their lives looking at those beautiful animals. It's very difficult to recognize them at sight. So what is usually the case is that they take a number of pictures of such whale, then they go back to the office and consult an online database of all known whales. Then they have to go picture by picture of similarly looking whales to find a match. So it's a very painstaking and time-consuming process. So now the idea is to use computer science and specifically machine learning to automate it. To do this, the researchers from a government agency called NOAA have organized a competition on Kaggle platform. They prepared over 4,000 images of whales together with labels describing which particular one is present on the image, and then they asked data scientists from around the world to compete with each other and create a best possible face recognizer for whales. That is, you have to develop an algorithm that takes such a picture as an input, and it has to output the number, or let's say the name of the whale that is present on it. So our team at DeepSense.io, of course, couldn't miss the chance to participate in such a, I don't know, maybe it's funny, maybe it's interesting, maybe it's a little bit odd competition. So we took the challenge and we ended up winning it. And even more so, we did so by a very large margin. The metric that you can see at the leaderboard is cross entropy, also called multi-class log loss. So in today's talk, we would like to describe our solution and in general how we did it. Okay, to understand the problem a little bit, because recognizing whales is a little bit different than recognizing humans, probably I should reveal what's the true face of a right whale. And it turns out that what really matters and what really distinguishes one whale from the other is a white pattern that they have on the top of their head. It's called callosity pattern, and it consists of a number of white spots or blobs that they have on the top of their heads. And here you can see these patterns on real photos. And they can vary to a great extent. For instance, here you can see a continuous pattern that goes through the length of the whole head. And on the other picture, you see a broken one, where you have two separate islands. And researchers have even developed some code names for these patterns. So when they are looking for, when they are trying to recognize a new whale, then they can query the database to only show whales that comply with the pattern. Oh, okay. So now when we know what we have to look for on these images, we can go back to the original ones and try to understand why this is not a straightforward task. So first of all, note that the nature of this problem is different from a very standard image recognition task. Because if you were to develop an algorithm that has to differentiate between a dog, a cat, and a wombat, then the differences would be very apparent and easy for an algorithm to spot. And here the situation is different, because the unique characteristics that make up an individual whale or that set up this particular whale apart from the others, and they are very slim, occupy only a small portion of the image and are not very apparent, yes, because you have to look at this white pattern on the top of the head. And even though the animals on the pictures are very similar, still the pictures can vary a lot, because as you can see, they can be taken at different times of the day, so they vary in terms of lighting or color palette. Some of them are very clear and focused on the animal, while the others are taken from afar and badly focused. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that we humans we have had our brains trained to account for all these difficulties, but and then we tend to neglect these problems. But for a computer or an algorithm, this is not an easy task, because you get just a matrix of real numbers as an input, and you have to figure out whether it's a whale, whether it's still a whale if you move it a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. So you have to do something about it. The other thing is that if we think about face recognition in general, we usually imagine looking at someone face to face, or maybe looking at a professionally taken picture, a little bit posed to. And here the situation is different, because whales just do not pose very well. They can be a little bit shy or hesitant. Sometimes they go under the water, sometimes they flip their tails, creating tons of foam around them. And in general, we couldn't count on any cooperation on their side. So now, if we know all the problems, we can start to think about some solution to overcome this. And we can wonder what we humans did to make the identification problem easier for us. And the answer is very simple. You probably have it in your pocket. We created IDs with passport-like photos. It's certainly easier to recognize someone when you look at a professionally taken picture than on some obscure one or taken at a party. So we can try to apply the same idea for whales. But now the problem is that we can't just retake the shots. We have to do something different. And what we did is extract the passport-like photos from original images. And now Maciej will tell you how we did it.
Okay, so now we'll start a bit more technical part of the talk. And so in the field of image recognition, the current state-of-the-art technique that is used is called deep convolutional neural networks. And this is also the technique that we used very extensively in our solution. So the solution contains 3 phases. The first phase is we get the raw image of a whale swimming at the sea, and what we want to do is find where the head is. We are looking for the bounding box of the head. So now, the second phase, when we already have this bounding box, is finding 2 special points on the head. The first one is called bonnet tip, and it's marked with red dot on the slides. And the second one is called blowhole, and is marked with this blue dot on the slides. And when we do this, we can rotate and scale this image so that we get this nicely looking passport photo. And in this first stage, we just classify that photo directly. So now I will tell you more about each of these phases. So yeah, the first phase, localizing the head. So this phase is of course done with a convolutional network, also called ConvNet in short. And the network that we used here was pretty shallow by today's standards, because it only had 5 layers and 1 fully connected layer. But before we do any training of any model, we have to have some data. And the data here is these bounding boxes. So we had to manually label the whole training set with these boxes. And when we have this training set, these annotations, we can look at this problem of predicting these bounding boxes like a regression problem. So in a regression problem, we would like our model to output 2 points, which is like 4 real numbers, and we would use something like the distance between the predicted points and the ground truth points as the loss that we would like to optimize during the training. But it turned out that this regression formulation didn't work for us very well, and we used a different approach, which is we divided the x-axis and the y-axis into bins, and that way we turned the regression problem into a classification problem, and we could just use the standard cross entropy as the loss function that we optimized. So, yeah, the second phase now. When we have these bounding boxes around the heads, now it's time to find these 2 special points, the bonnet tip and the blowhole. So this phase is also done with a convnet, but a deeper one. We used something like 9 convolutional layers. And this time we also face the problem of looking at the problem as regression or maybe the classification of these bins. And also the second approach worked better for us. So we have, after this phase, when we have these 2 points, we can rotate and scale the images to get these nicely looking passport images. So I think that considering the images that we had at the beginning of the processing, these passport photos are of very good quality. Okay, so now we got the passport photos, and it's time for the last phase, which is direct classification. This phase is also done with convnets, but also deeper ones. And in our final model that we submitted, we used a blend of many different neural nets, many different convnets. I think we had something like 15 in the blend. And we achieved on the final test data, we achieved accuracy of full 87%. We also measured what's called top 5 accuracy, which is when you have the predictions of your model, you take the most probable 5, and if the correct class is in those 5, then you consider the answer correct. And this top 5 accuracy is 95%. The other thing, we also measured top 10 accuracy, and it was 97%, so a little gain. So now I'll tell you more about the techniques and methods that we use to achieve those scores. Some of them are very standard, and some of them are like not very common. So the first technique is called ensembling, and I already told you that we had a lot of models and that we blended them. So by blended I mean we averaged the predictions of those models, but those models had very different scores, so we averaged them with giving more weight to the better ones, of course. So yeah, the next technique is called data augmentation, and it's a very standard one. So in data augmentation, you want to fight overfitting of your models. So what you do is that you have some training data, and you want to generate more data, artificial data based on this training data. So what you can do, you can, for example, rotate the images, you can translate the images, you can scale them, and some other things. And we use those geometric augmentation mostly in the first and the second stage of the solution, because in the last one, the images were nicely aligned and we didn't want to mess them up. We used a little bit of this geometric augmentation, but very little. The other augmentation technique is called color perturbation, and it works by adding some constant to each pixel, so that you get a different image, but you also want those images that you get to be naturally looking, so you have to be a bit more careful about the values that you add. The next thing is what we call kicking the learning rate, and it's not a very standard technique. So it's illustrated by the graph that you see. The graph presents some training statistics. Among them, there's the training cost that we were minimizing. And what we've done here is that in some moment in time, we increase the learning rate a lot. You can see probably this moment. And what happened is that the training cost goes up a lot and then start to decrease, but it decreases faster and reaches the level that we couldn't achieve without doing such a big increase in the learning rate. The next thing is called auxiliary training targets. So this is about, imagine you have a model and you are interested in the model predicting which class the image is in. So in the whale scales, we were interested in which individual whale is on the picture. And what you can do is you can add another target. For example, in the whales case, you could ask for what is the pattern on the whale's head? Is it continuous or is it broken? And that way you encourage the network to create proper features. And you can think about these auxiliary training targets as a method to regularize your models. The next thing is called reusing validation set. And in this particular problem, we didn't get a lot of data from Kaggle. We got, for example, something like 4,500 pictures, and this isn't a lot. And we used a validation set that was like 10% of this data to locally validate our models, but we didn't want to waste this data. And we wanted also to train models on the data. And in our case, it was pretty easy, because the models that we trained didn't overtrain. So we didn't have to use the validation set to stop the training in some particular moment. We just could train a model to infinity. So what we do was like either train the model entirely on the whole training set from the beginning, or we trained with this validation set and then do some retraining on the whole training set. Reusing this validation set helped a lot, really a lot. I didn't expect such a gain from this. And the last thing that we used is calibrating probabilities. This thing we discovered at the end of the competition. And it's quite strange, because it works by, you have, for example, you have your model and the predictions of the model. And what you do is simply rise these predictions to the power of 1.4, 1.5, something like that. Then normalize this to be a distribution. And it turns out that such an operation makes your scores better. And it makes your scores better. In our final submission, it was like 15% decrease in the score. So it was a lot. You can think of this operation like you want to increase the most probable classes and decrease the lowest probable classes. Okay, that will...
Could you tell something more about the chart?
And of course, it wasn't the case that this three-stage solution was the first thing we thought about, like when we started the contest. And this solution was like the result of our many experiments, attempts, and things like that. And this graph shows our score versus time during the competition. And except maybe for the middle period, in the middle period of the competition, we made like steady progress with the score. And I return at the end to this period and say why we didn't make a lot of progress there. So okay, what was the path that led us to this final solution? So the first thing we've done, and probably anyone would done when he saw the problem of image recognition, was just take just train any convnet on the images and see what the results are. And of course we did that. The scores weren't very good, and we started thinking that we have to help our models learn by exposing the whale. And the attempts, our first attempts were quite ad hoc. For example, we tried to look at each pixel, the color of each pixel, and decide, only looking at this color, if it belongs to the whale or if it belongs to the sea. And based on that, we tried to estimate where the whale is. And that approach worked a little, but it had a lot of problems. For example, it's very easy to mistake these patterns on the whale's head with the foam that sometimes is on the sea. And these kinds of methods take a lot of time, and they have their limits. Yeah, you can't expect to precisely locate the whale with such ad hoc things. Then we decided that we have to do something different, and we just annotated the whole training set with these bounding boxes. We used some project called Sloth to do it. There's the screenshot of the program. And this operation didn't take very long. It was like 5 hours of labeling time. And I have to say that, like, considering the score, this was like the most effectively spent time in the whole competition. It was by far the most effective. 5 man-hours. Yeah. Yeah, and 1 woman hour. Wow. Something like that. Okay, so now we have this annotation. So what we did next was we wanted to train some model, and our first try was to train a model that gets only one image and tries to decide, does it contain the head of the whale or not? We trained that model and applied it in a sliding window fashion on different sizes, scales, and things like that. And then, after we got these bounding boxes from this model, we trained some simple classification network and got very good results. We jumped to the first place with quite a good margin. But we also saw that the bounding boxes that we are getting from the model are not perfect. Sometimes there was absolutely no whale's head in the bounding boxes. So we did what I've already told you. We did this classification with bins on the whole image, and it worked better, and we use it.
How many bins did you use? Like
so
from 20 to
60, something like that. We tried different numbers.
60 is a good number.
We probably use this 60. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so what happened next was some guy came to the Kaggle forums and published the whole training set, annotated with these bonnet tips and blowholes, these 2 points on the head. And at first we used these labels only as this auxiliary training data, a training target, and it helped us. But then we thought, because we have a model that predicts these 2 points, why not try creating these passport photos? And we've done that. We didn't expect that the gain would be so big, but it was, and it ended up in the final solution. So of course we tried many other things, but they didn't work. Among the things we tried were transformer networks, triplet training, also residual networks. We spent a lot of time on them to just see that they don't work. So that was the competition, and now we return to the period of the competition that we didn't make a lot of progress in. And there's a reason, as I told you, because we were like busy with something else. So in our lives, we trained a lot of machine learning models, whether in Kaggle competition or other projects. And what we observe is that we spend a lot of time on things that shouldn't like consume that much time if only we had proper tools to do these things. And what are the things that steal your time when you train machine learning models? The first is, when you train a model, you want to monitor its progress on the training validation set. So you monitor, for example, training loss, training cost, validation loss, something like that. And in the past, we were doing it by just logging these values to the files and checking up the files to see how the model is doing. And this is very slow and inconvenient. And it's easy to imagine that such nice plots with these training statistics are a lot better for assessing the model. The next thing is, when you have a few machines and maybe more than one people in a team, then you probably want to train more than one model in parallel. And you end up with the problem managing what models runs where. And it is also time-consuming and things that can easily be done if you have the proper tool. The next thing is that when a project is longer, you train a lot of models, and you have to somehow remember what were the models that you trained, what were the scores, what were the hyperparameters, what were the codes that were used to train these models. And it becomes a problem. You can use some tools, standard tools like Google Docs, Git, for tracking this, but it also can be done better. The last thing is, when you have a team of people, you want them to share the results, the hyperparameters that they use to train the models, share the training statistics. And when you don't have proper tool, you end up with people sending such things by email, which is also not a very good way to do that. So what we've done is, in this competition, we saw all these problems again, and we decided that we have to solve them. And we created this thing called Neptune that solved all these problems, and it really helped us save a lot of time during this competition and ultimately win this competition. And we keep using this tool in our current machine learning projects. So that was it. Here's the link if you want to read more about the solution, and you can read the code there.